So we're on class 2 here of this amazing course we're taking, Colorful Profiles. Last week we discussed 3 pretty remarkable converts to Judaism and their contributions to Jewish history. Today we're going to be delving into 3 fascinating characters. The theme of the class today is going to be on the concept of the responsibility God gave us in the Torah to the Jewish people to be a light unto the nations. What does that mean? Right? So I know some people maybe feel uncomfortable with this concept, like chosen and this and that. I think we could talk about it for a few moments, what that means. In our tradition, what it means is that there is a responsibility. It's not a reason to walk with your nose in the air. We are burdened with a responsibility to share morality from the Torah. That's what it means. We have Torah. Torah is a book from God. When you buy a Tesla car, or you buy an iPhone, or you buy a refrigerator, it comes with a manual, right? The manufacturer who made the fridge also made a manual. So you want to know how to treat the fridge, you look at the manual, right? The maintenance and all the good. You go online, okay, new day, AI. But the same thing is true with the human being. We are created, and when God created us, he gave us a manual. What's the manual? The Torah. Who's responsible to make sure the Torah gets out into the world and everyone reads it and derives morality from it? That's our responsibility. Now, that's not limited, but that's our responsibility. That's what that means to be chosen and to be a light unto the nations. So let's jump right into the lesson today. I'm sure everyone has a book. Does anyone not have a book? Okay. Let's talk after. We're going to arrange that. Okay. But it's pretty good. Last week we were a bunch more. Only one doesn't. That's pretty good. But you guys, I guess we'll share. That's perfect. Okay. So let's open up to page number 48. And as we normally do, we go along here and ask people to join us in reading. Some people are mid-bite. So maybe we'll start with Joan. We're page 48. Yeah. Please, the paragraph, the introductory paragraph. Yes.
The previous lesson to Judaism and the valuable contributions they brought to Jewish life. Today's lesson probes the flip side of this theme, the incredible lives of remarkable Jews who positively influenced the larger non-Jewish society that surrounded them.
Beautiful. So we have as a responsibility, as we said, is to be a light unto the nations. Okay, our uniquely Jewish influence that brings the world closer to God, closer to Hashem. That's what it means at a basic level. Let's look at Isaiah, text number 1. Shayla, please, Isaiah. Let's see what it says in Isaiah about this.
So said Almighty God, who created the heavens and stretched them out, spread out the earth with all that springs from it, and gave a soul to its people and life to those who walk on it. I, God, have called you with righteousness. I will strengthen your hand. I will protect you, and I will set you as a covenant for all people and a light unto the nations.
So God definitely introduces himself of who he is, creator of heaven and earth, and he puts a responsibility for us to be a light unto the nations. So let's go on page 50, guys. Maybe we'll do an exercise all together here. List several Jewish individuals whom you consider to have fulfilled the Jewish destiny of serving as a light unto the nations. Anybody want to offer some characters? Robbie.
Rabbi Jonathan Sachs.
Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Any others come to mind? Yes?
You.
Me. Whoa. Hey, slow down. Slow down. Appreciate that. Okay. think it's a little bit of a stretch, but okay, thank you.
No, after yesterday, yes.
Okay. Let's exclude present company for the sake of this conversation. Okay, yes, Robbie, who else?
Elie Wiesel.
Elie Wiesel, beautiful. Anyone else? Barry, anyone come to mind?
Politician Abe Ribicoff.
Hey, Rubikoff. Okay, very good. Okay. Maimonides, okay.
How about Ibn Ezra?
Ibn Ezra, okay. Oof, whipping him out. Okay, Mike?
I was thinking of a non-religious like divinations, people who have made a difference.
Okay, go ahead. Like who?
Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein, okay. Okay. Was Columbus Jewish? I don't know. There's theories out there. Who knows? There's theories, yeah. Robbie, what do you say?
Anne Frank.
Anne Frank, okay. Interesting.
Golda Meir.
Golda Meir, okay. Okay.
Henrietta Zold.
Say again?
Henrietta Zold, NASA creator.
Okay, okay. Right, so these are definitely notable, influential, made a big mark in our society. I mean, we have the likes of Karl Marx, which was Jewish, and we have people on that side of the spectrum too. I don't know if we should get into all those, but the point that I think we should focus on here today is specifically with this mandate of being a light unto the nations from a Torah perspective, which means, yes, we have the one who created the vaccines. What's his name?
So,
Exactly. We have many Jewish people that contributed their marks to the world. But in the context of our definition or our focus here, we want to focus on Jews that in history contributed this idea, which is bring the world closer to Hashem. Right? So Albert Einstein, he was Jewish, contributed a huge amount, but maybe he fall into that category. Yes.
You mentioned the word Hashem
Oh,
as an alternative to God.
yes, thank you.
Can you spend a minute about that?
So the word I say Hashem is the Hebrew word that literally translates the name. Hashem means the name, because there's God Himself, then there's God who we sometimes don't know how to define God Himself, and all we know is the name of God. So the way we kind of in conversations refer to God, we say Hashem, which means, but yes, they're interchangeable in today's class. Thank you, Mike. Addie, what did you say?
the Rebbe.
The Rebbe, okay, beautiful. Thank you. And it's a good point to mention. Today, as we stand, is the 3rd of Tammuz. The Rebbe's yahrzeit is right now, today, last night and today. And I think the Rebbe is one of the most influential Jewish leaders in modern history. The Jewish landscape around the world is enhanced and improved and changed because of the Rebbe's life, without a question in my mind. From the greatest politicians and leaders and influencers in the world to the simple person living in a corner store in the middle of who knows where, Kentucky, the Rebbe had influence on. The Rebbe's life, the Rebbe's soul, the Rebbe's just being, who saw the world from a God's perspective and was able to communicate that, had a following, is something that we cherish, something that very few in our history could rise to such levels. And on the Rebbe's yahrzeit today, I think it's a beautiful thing to recognize and maybe dedicate the class to the Rebbe's memory. So thank you for reminding me, Addie. I actually wanted to start with that and I forgot. Thank you. Okay, so let's keep on going. Let's look at text number 2. Bill, text 2? Nisht? Okay, Nisht. Addie, text 2, please.
Where's page 50?
Page 50, yes, please.
The Jewish people are destined to be a light unto the nations, as the verse states. Nations will go by your light and kings by the brightness of your radiance. Isaiah 63. This refers to the light of the Torah, which will issue forth to the nations from Zion.
Okay, one more paragraph.
The Jewish people will sustain the nations of the world through guiding them to observe the 7 Noahide laws and to walk in the proper path. As the verse states, multitudes of nations will go to each other and tell one another, come, let us ascend to the mountain of God, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths. For the Torah will issue forth from Zion, the word of God from Jerusalem.
Perfect. So this is basically the guidance that the Jewish people have. As we said last week when we spoke about the converts, Judaism is not into conversion. We don't proselytize. We don't think it's a good thing to make everyone Jewish. Not everyone has to be Jewish to be part of the global mission, and not everyone has to be Jewish in order to merit the Jewish world to come, whatever that means, right? So what is the minimum requirement from the nations of the world, from everyone, from the humanity at large, is the 7 Noahide laws, which we'll talk about later. And what it means that the Jewish people should be a light unto the nations is that they have a responsibility to share the 7 Noahide laws with the whole world. And you'll see the 7 Noahide laws, they sound familiar to the 10 Commandments, but it's basic humanity, basic civilized society where we respect each other, where we live with a certain degree of do's and don'ts that helps us foster a beautiful world. So we'll talk about them in the second part of today's class. Okay, but if you look at exercise 2.2, page 51, review your earlier list of Jews who had a significant influence on the world and apply the following 3 questions to each of these individuals. Did Judaism play a major role in this individual's personal life? That's question A. Question B, did Judaism play a role in this person's influence on the world? Right? So even if they were personally, let's say, observant, or Judaism was important, but was that a Jewish influence? And number 3, did this person leave a mark on Judaism? That's our criteria for someone who fulfilled this idea of being a light unto the nation. So we said the Rebbe, we said Maimonides, I think, right? Ibn Ezra, Maimonides, we said all these famous ones. But today we're going to discuss 3 Jews who fit the mold for being a light unto the nations and are not so famous. I'm sure, I haven't heard of 2 out of the 3 before today. I heard the name, but I didn't know much about them, right? So this is pretty cool. We're going to dive into 3 individuals who left this mark, who fit the mold, and are not so known. That's the idea of today's class. So let's jump right in, okay? The first one is Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid. Nagid means prince. So let's see on page 52. Not Ruth, I'm sorry. What's your name? Carmen.
Oh, yeah.
Carmen Ross, right? Could you read text number 50 on page 52? Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid.
Our first influential Jew is Rabbi Chaim Cohen. He rose to prominence in 11th century Granada, Spain, serving his own people as a leading Talmud scholar and serving his host country in 2 extremely rare positions, as a top advisor to a non-Jewish ruler and as a commander of the country's non-Jewish armed forces. And I know a little bit about this.
Okay.
And this is the time when the Islam pervaded in Spain, and they were surrounded by Islamic law. And he was very, very courageous, but he also was very tactful, and he was able to gain prominence because he had something to offer.
We will learn all about it. Correct.
And
yes.
he was at the time of not Abinez, the Maimonides.
A little bit before Maimonides.
Before.
Yes, maybe before Maimonides. Yeah.
There was a turnover in the ruling class of Spain, of the Islamic, the Berbers from North Africa.
Berbers, exactly. We're going there right now.
And they were very harsh rulers, and they really persecuted the Jews then.
Yes, we're going to get into all that right now. Yes, thank you, Carmen. Exactly. So Rab Shmuel HaNagid, HaNagid again means the prince, was born in 993 in Cordoba, Spain. Right, so Cordoba is the capital of Spain, right? But back in those times, Spain, if you look on your page 53, Spain was not one country. It was made up of small provinces, right? Each had their own ruler. So the southern part of Spain was Muslim. Different ethnic groups, Arabs, Berbers, Slavs. There was different ethnic groups at the time. And if you look at your page there, page 53, you see a map. Okay. So they say the Jewish community of Spain dates back to when the exile of the Second Temple to Rome and eventually to Spain. That's where they ended up. That's how the Jews ended up in that area. So we have an amazing story of a person who started off as a tremendous Talmudic scholar and ended up having this incredible political influence till he was the commander for about 20 years, commander of the military armed forces. So to say that is like saying that today you have the greatest rabbi in America, also serves as the Secretary of Defense, or I don't know what, so the Joint Chief of Staff. It's like unheard of such a thing, right? Then we're going to learn about this pretty fascinating character. Okay, so here we have a text in text 3 from Rabbi Avram ibn Abud, which is also known as the Ravid, which is an incredible scholar, lived during the Rambam's time actually, and he writes about the Shmuel Hanagi and his influence. Let's see, Rabbi, please.
One of the outstanding disciples of Rabbi Chanach ben Moshe was Rabbi Shmuel Halevi the Nagi, or Prince, the son of Rabbi Yosef, surnamed Ben Nagrella, of the community of Cordova. Aside from being a great Torah scholar and a highly cultured person, Rabbi Shmuel was highly versed in Arabic literature and style and was, indeed, competent to serve in the king's palace. Nevertheless, he maintained himself in very modest circumstances as a spice merchant until the time when war broke out in Spain. With the termination of the rule of the house of Ibn Abi Amir and the seizure of power by the Berber chiefs, the city of Cordova dwindled and its inhabitants were compelled to flee. Rabbi Shmuel fled to Malaga, where he occupied a shop as a spice merchant. His shop happened to join the courtyard of Abu Qasim ibn al-Arif, the vizier and scribe of King Habas, the son of Maxim, the Berber king of Granada. And as a result, the scribe's maidservant would ask Rabbi Shmuel to write letters for her to her master when he was away from home. When Ibn al-Arif received the letters, he was astounded at the learning they reflected. Consequently, when after some time the scribe was given leave by King Habas to return to his home in Malaga, he asked the people of his household, "Who wrote the letters that I received from you?" They replied, "A certain Jew from the community of Cordova, who lives next door to your courtyard, wrote them on our behalf." The scribe ordered that Rabbi Shmuel be brought to him at once. He told him, "It does not become you to spend your time in a shop. From now on, you are to stay at my side." He thus became the scribe and counselor of the counselor to the king. The counsel that Rabbi Shmuel provided was remarkable and accurate, as if one had consulted the oracle of God. Thanks to his counsel, King Habas achieved successes and became exceedingly great. Subsequently, when the scribe Ibn al-Arif took ill and felt his own death approaching, King Habas paid him a visit and said to him, "What am I going to do? Who will counsel me in the wars that surround me on every side?" Ibn al-Arif replied, "I never counseled you out of my own mind, but out of the mind of this Jew, my scribe. Look after him well, and let him be like a father and a guide to you. Do whatever he says, and God will help you." Accordingly, after the scribe's death, King Habas brought Rabbi Shmuel Halevi to his palace and made him scribe and counselor. And thus he entered the king's palace in the year 4780, 1020 CE.
Pretty remarkable stuff. We have a rabbi that was discovered as to be an incredible ability to be a scribe, which eventually led to him, climbing the ranks. So he worked as a humble spice merchant. His talents were discovered by the king's vizier. He was appointed scribe and counselor to the king of Granada. And then he was appointed, this is soon. Okay, so this was something once the Berber tribes took over that region, they weren't so educated. So they needed somebody which had more of a sophisticated, ability. And when he became, he wasn't just a scribe. Back in the day, scribes were more advisors. They were a lot harder. They weren't just a secretary typing on the typewriter. These were people which had the ability to understand vast knowledges of various areas. He also had the ability not only in Torah. He was a scholar in modern science at the time. He was a poet. He was a writer. He was a very sophisticated man. So let's see how this ended up to become military leadership. Let's look at text number 4, page 58. Ron, please. Let's see.
Patron of Torah.
Rabbi Shmuel was appointed as Nagid in 4787. He achieved tremendous good for the Jewish people in Spain, the Marab, Egypt, Sicily, and even as far as the Academy in Babylonia, and the holy city of Jerusalem. He provided material benefits from his own purse for Torah students in all these countries. He also purchased many books, copies of the Holy Scriptures, as well as the Mishnah and the Talmud, which are also considered sacred texts. Throughout Spain, the countries just mentioned, whoever wished to devote themselves full-time to the study of Torah found in him a patron. Moreover, he retained scribes to produce copies of the Mishnah and Talmud, which he presented to students who were unable to purchase copies themselves, both in the academies of Spain as well as in the other countries mentioned. These gifts were complemented with annual contributions of olive oil to synagogues of Jerusalem, which he would dispatch from his own estate.
So he became incredibly wealthy himself. So in the year 1038, when King Habus passed away, when he died, he had two sons. One son's name was Badis, and one son's name was Bulugin. Now, Bulugin was seen to be the successor of his father. Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid threw his support behind the less favorable son, which was Badis. And at the end, in 1038, when this struggle was resolved, Badis actually became the king. And that loyalty that Shmuel Hanagid showed to Badis, even when it was unpopular, he was greatly rewarded for that. So he was rewarded with stature, but he was rewarded with wealth. And what he chose to do with his wealth was to support, as we just finished reading, Jewish study in Jerusalem and throughout the world to ensure that the Jewish continuity. We always understood this. We'll learn about this in the third of our cases today. What kept the Jewish people alive through 2,000 years of exile was the fact that we were steadfast studying the Torah, studying the Talmud, studying the Mishnah, studying Jewish law. It's impossible for a group of people to survive when they don't have a physical place to live if there's nothing to hold on to. What did we hold on to? We held on to the books. So Shmuel Hanagid realized this. The Jewish people at that time were, there was shifting powers in every area where they were, and with that came, every single time that one power took over, the Jews were the victims in many of those situations. So he recognized he has to support Torah study and use all his influence for that. Eventually, when he became the military commander of this Badis, the king at the time. Now, he fought in many wars, and he was successful. For a few months a year, he would be on the front lines of the war itself. And there was one occasion when he actually, Shmuel Hanagid himself, in 1049, was captured by the enemy. As a very high-ranking officer or politician, he was captured. His son, Shmuel Hanagid's son, wrote the following poem. Shmuel himself wrote the following poem about his capture and about his life. So let's see, pretty incredible poem we have here. Mike, will you read text 5, mid-bite? Did I catch you mid-bite? All right. Let's see.
Text 5, the battlefield vow. Rabbi Yehosef Hanagid. Disastrous war erupted in the month of Iyar in the year 4809, April and May 1049 CE. The disaster unfolded when the inhabitants of Malaga betrayed our forces in the mountains on a Thursday that was the last day of the month of Iyar, May 10th. As a result, mighty officers were killed in the battle, and my father, may the exalted God bring him honor, was captured. God saved him in a remarkable and unprecedented manner. After his rescue, he made a vow to collect and compose Hilchata Givarata, a comprehensive compendium of Jewish laws. To introduce this work, he penned the following poem, which describes the war and his deliverance. God has enabled me to expound on the Torah and mitzvot and blessed me with the ability to issue rulings. Listen to me, therefore, you virtuous people, and hear the Torah explained virtuously. I inquire into God's rules as best I can, as far as my mind can probe. I point out the common errors to avoid them, and write down the proper laws to establish them. I inscribe that which is beyond dispute, articulately and with clarity. I exhume every straight matter that had lain buried, and I lead every distorted manner to its grave. God, protect the door of my lips and mouth from expressing foreign and misguided notions. Be with my words to help me, just as you assist me in my misfortune. Just as you recently delivered me into the hands of oppressors, and they decreed death on me, nevertheless, you showed great mercy to me while I was captured on the day of my calamity. You delivered me into their hands, but you were my mighty tower, my secure fortress. They seized me with their hands, but I was riding upon the precious clouds. They rushed to kill me with arrows like fiery flames, with spears like strong beams. They thought they could kill me with these weapons, but behold, their hands were tied behind their backs. The bands of my enemies were shamed, and my allies sang praise to the God of the universe. Therefore, on my lips, all my days and nights will be songs for the mighty God. Who can say that the dead will not be resurrected? I am a dead man brought up from the grave.
Beautiful. So we have here, he opens up. So Shmuel Hanagid opens up this poem with what? Discussing the halachic work that he was writing. What is this halacha? So halacha means Jewish law. And why was this so revolutionary? So the way it worked, from the destruction of the first temple. Who destroyed the first temple? The Babylonians. So the Jews were exiled to Babylonia. From the destruction of the first temple, Jews were residing in that area, which is current day Iraq. And they set up houses of study that became the center, even after the Jews returned to Israel. And the second temple was built. And even during the whole second temple period, there was a strong presence of Jewish people and Jewish authority in Babylonia. Today, when we study Talmud, those of us that took the last class decoding the Talmud, we know that the Talmud itself, when we refer to the Talmud, we refer to the Babylonian Talmud. There are two Talmuds, right, the Babylonian and the Jerusalem. But which one is studied today around the world? The Babylonian Talmud. That is the masterpiece of Jewish law and Jewish life. So when eventually 1,000 years later, right, after the destruction of the Second Temple, when many of the Jews immigrated, or actually expelled, but sent to Spain, what happened as they're living there? They had to set up their own halachic structure, their own Jewish law structure. But many of the times they didn't have an answer. So what did they do? They needed to send a letter to Babylonia. Literally took weeks and weeks to get there, maybe even months. And then they would get a response. Babylonia had all the Torah giants of the world living in Babylonia. They'd come back and they'd get a response. So Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid realized that this is not sustainable. Our area is becoming more and more established as a Jewish pillar and as a Jewish authority of that generation. And he set up this halachic rulings that were he set up a system for Jewish law where opinions would be recorded, would be debated, would be decided on, and we shouldn't rely anymore on Babylonian. And we find even today, when we're studying Talmud, we're studying a piece of the Talmud, we would compare, what did the Babylonian sages say? There's arguments there, by the way. It's not always one opinion. What did the Spanish Jewish area, there were many different halachic systems set up. And Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid, after he was freed miraculously from captivity, he said, I need to contribute something to my brethren in our area. And that's what his contribution was. So he was a gifted scholar in his own right, but he was a military, political giant. And at the end of his life, he chose to institute this idea of a halachic system for the Spanish Jewry. Let's see, text number 6, praise from actually a Muslim poet, 11th century Muslim poet who lived in Spain. And what did he write about Shmuel Hanagid? Let's see. Warren, please. Page 64, text 6.
Those who count Moses among them and enjoy his life, say what you want about them, but you will not arrive at 1/10 of their quality. How many visible marvels on earth they have accomplished, and how many generous gifts they have continually given to the people. You, Rabbi Shmuel
Hanagid.
are superior to the noblemen of the Orient and the Occidental. But just as gold is superior to copper, and just as gold is superior to copper in importance. If people could distinguish between doom and the right way, they would have kissed your 10 finger. Thanks to you, I've won this world, and I have satisfied my wishes. And thanks to you, I long to meet the same gain in the other world. I profess openly the religion which describes observance on Saturday. When I stand before you and when I am among the compatriots, I believe in the religion secretly.
So he didn't write this as like a intention for conversion. He just understood that the teachings of Moses, teachings of the Torah, the Jewish teachings were true and authentic teachings, and it didn't lead to the next step, which was conversion. But we can see here that Rabbi Shmuel Hanagid, his life was saved and he wrote the Hilchot Gevirta, but you see that he was definitely fit this mold of a light unto the nations, in his political, secular contributions, but also what he contributed to the Jewish people internally. So yes, he was a top scholar, he was a philosopher, he was a poet, he was a scientist, he was financially successful, he had all this influence, he was politically powerful, but what became his most fundamental contribution to Spanish Jewry was what he did with the halacha setup. So what we see from Shmuel Hanagid, a model for those who aspire to excellence in both religious and secular worlds without sacrificing anything. He didn't say, "Oh, I have all this power. Let me, tone it down in the Jewish world." No, he took these two worlds and he was powerful and influential in both. Pretty incredible stuff. Okay. Should we stop for some questions or comments before I go to the next character?
Did he,
Yeah.
did he convert Al-Munfati?
No.
But the man said, right back here, and when I am among my compatriots, I believe in that religion secretly.
Right, because back in the day, you weren't allowed to believe in
No,
it.
I know, and the
Right.
Jews were not allowed to have temples. They
Right.
had to have, they had the Jewish quarters. And the
Right.
Jewish quarters is the only place where they could pray, where they can worship God in their homes. But they were given certain rights.
But back in the day, a Muslim, someone who was, in those days,
Yes.
someone with that prominence was not allowed to say that they believe in Judaism. They believe in the teachings of Judaism. That was
That was a no-no.
that was a big no-no.
Because that was in contrast.
So that's why he believed in it secretly, right? But he didn't convert. It wasn't a
But it seems like in his heart he converted.
right. So no, it didn't end up with that. I have a note here that says another letter from him that's he didn't convert at all, but he definitely admired and
I
recognized the truth of
believe in
Judaism.
that religion secretly.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, Mike.
Just two quick comments. One, I may have missed it in the text in the book, but Jews of the time, they were all totally proficient and wrote in Arabic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hebrew was the holy language, which was to a large extent saved for writing about holy issues.
Yeah.
But a lot of poetry, a lot of the logical writings, I'm sure when he was writing about military issues,
Yeah.
he was writing in Arabic.
100%.
The other thing was it really emphasized the point that Robbie made when you were asked about who we thought of who had those capabilities.
Rambam.
Rambam on one hand, but Jonathan Sacks.
Ah.
Just gonna talk about
that-
it again.
I mean, his excellence in secular matters was reflected in the fact that he became a lord of the British Empire.
Yeah.
I mean, not a whole lot of rabbis gained that secular honor. And it wasn't for his contributions to the Jewish community.
Wow, that's nice. Modern example of that.
That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking about.
beautiful.
That's what I
Yeah,
was gonna say, he was definitely an advisor
yeah,
to the British Parliament and to the throne.
Yeah.
He was very highly regarded.
no question, no question. Yeah, it's a good modern example of that. I want to say, tying it back to the Rebbe's yard site, when Jonathan Sachs was does everyone know who he is? Let me just say quickly, Jonathan Sachs passed away, what, 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
He was an author of maybe 30, 40 books. Today, he's one of the most famous rabbis around. He was a chief rabbi of England for many years, of the UK for many years. And he also was, what's the right term? He was
An advisor.
an advisor, right? But he actually, when he was a teenager, he didn't know what path to take. So he went to the Rebbe and he asked the Rebbe, he heard about the Rebbe in England. So he came to New York and he said, yeah, he knocked on the door of the Rebbe's office. I want to meet the Rebbe. I have questions about my career path. So you don't just come to New York and knock on the door and get a meeting. It doesn't work that way. So he said that, people schedule months in advance. So I think in the 60s, I believe. And so he says, listen, I have an aunt living in Los Angeles. I take a Greyhound bus to Los Angeles. When I get a meeting, this is her phone number. Call her and let me know, and I'll come back to New York. Deal. He was there, I think a month later, a month or two later, he gets a call. You're scheduled for another, to meet with the Rebbe. Fine. So when anyone met with the Rebbe, the way it would normally work when it came to these types of questions, they would write down option A, option B, option C. It wasn't like, hey, Rebbe, what should I do? It's like, no, I'm into this, I'm into that, I'm into the other. Here's my passions. Here's why this, weighing pros and cons. And the Rebbe would kind of steer you in the right direction, ask some questions or maybe choose or. So he took 2 days to get back from Los Angeles to New York on a Greyhound bus. He talks about the story. Him describing the story, there's nothing like it. And he comes into what?
I'd like to listen to that.
Yeah, I can send the link out.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. He spoke at the Chabad International Convention maybe 10 years ago, and he said over the story at length. He has like a 40-minute speech. He basically attributes his whole life to this meeting with the Rebbe. But he sat with the Rebbe, and he had 3 ideas, 3 options that he wanted to go into. He wanted to be an economist. He wrote why he felt that way. He wanted to be a philosopher. And he wanted to be a professor, maybe of psychology, I think it was, professor of psychology. And each one had his reasoning. And he said, typically, he heard from the, he wasn't Chabad himself, but he heard, you go and the Rebbe will choose, the Rebbe will question and choose one. But the Rebbe goes, not 1, not 2, not 3. The Rebbe says, today in England, we have a problem. There's not enough rabbis in England. Who's going to make sure that the Jewish people of England are served properly? So he says, the Rebbe says, not only do I think not 1, not 2, not 3, I think you should go back to England and you should be not just a rabbi, but you should be a rabbi that teaches rabbis, that trains other rabbis. And he was like, this is against the rules. The rules are I give you 3 options and you help me choose. You don't give me a 4th option I never even thought of, right? And he basically, he followed the Rebbe's advice, went back to England, became a rabbi, started training rabbis. And his influence on this world today is directly because of that meeting with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe is someone who had a spiritual intuition, was able to see things that I think you and I don't see. And the Rebbe saw this soul is destined for something amazing, something great. And then he finishes his talk by that talk, how he actually ended up contributing to the society, the 3 things that he originally wanted to, and how he spoke, how he has a weekly lecture in economics at this university, and he teaches philosophy here. So he said everything came full circle. That's Jonathan Sachs, which was, I think, a few in a generation we encounter somebody like that.
Big loss to the world.
Big loss when he passed away. He had cancer at the end of his life. He passed away. 72. Yep, young. Yep, 100%. I could go on and on about him, but for the sake of this time, let's keep on going. Okay, let's keep on going. So the next character we're going to be discussing is Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael. Let's see. Muhammad, please. Let's do page 65, that paragraph.
Rabbi
Menashe.
Menashe ben Yisrael Spain's golden age of Jewish culture flourished for centuries, but faltered as the Iberian Peninsula was conquered by Christians and religious opposition took hold. Jewish life ultimately halted at the end of the 15th century, when the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula were expelled or converted to Christianity. The next step in this lesson examines the life of Rabbi Menachem ben Israel, a descendant of a Spanish Jewish family that had been forced to convert to Christianity over 100 years before his birth in 1604.
So we're going to dive into this character, but one thing is different between Rabbi Menachem ben Yisrael and the previous person, which was Shmuel HaNagid, is that Shmuel HaNagid did have societal influence, but the influence wasn't Torah influence. There's zero evidence of him teaching Torah or teaching God's word. He was very influential. He was influential in the Jewish people, Torah to the Jewish people, and political, military, other stuff to the general public. So that's the difference. Menachem ben Yisrael will find that he actually had a direct effect on those around him, teaching Torah, teaching morality from Torah to all his brothers and sisters, Jewish and non-Jewish alike, in his area. Let's look. You'll see a picture of him on page 65. Rabbi Menachem ben Yisrael. So in 1492, as we know, the Jews of Spain were presented with a very stark choice: either convert or leave the country. Many Jews converted. They thought that it's going to be all right. A couple of years, we'll do what we got to do. Carmen, you said that your family comes from conversos.
They were descendant of the Spanish Jews that did convert.
That did convert, exactly. Okay, there's many Jews that I've heard that they're Jews today. For example, they would light Shabbat candles, but they'd do it in the basement. Yes, your family too. Amazing. Yep, I believe my family too. My father's mother is from northern Morocco, from Larache, and your father's from Larache, right? So they say a lot of those Jews came over from Spain. They're originally from that group. Yeah.
And some went to Turkey and were well received by the Ottoman Empire.
True. Yes, 100%. So many Jews moved over to the neighboring Portugal when that happened in 1492. But in 1497, 5 years later, the king of Portugal came up with his own decree: either convert or leave. So what did the Jews do? They moved on to Lisbon, which is right neighboring as well.
And further up.
Further up, yes. Okay. But the king made a blockade. Why? Because the Jewish people at the end of the day, they had the benefits. There were some benefits to having the Jews around. I don't know if they're all incredibly talented, but at least some of them are. So they were able to. They actually tried to convince the Jewish people to stay, and instead of giving them an option to leave, it was kind of a forced conversion of that. And we hear there's a man named Gaspar Rodriguez Nunes, which was arrested in Portugal in 1596, about 100 years later. And here we have a pretty graphic description of what was happening to him. When he was discovered, they were sensing that he was indeed a converso, was an undercover Jew, and they were torturing him. This text took out a lot of the gory details of the torture, but you get the concept on text 7 of what was happening, and then until he finally admitted and his fate. So maybe Beth, right? Let's do text 7, please.
Secret 2. As Gaspar Rodriguez Nunez sat in his cell waiting for his 4th session with the Lisbon Inquisition, he was in excruciating pain. His 3 previous stints on the rack and the hoist had seriously damaged his 39-year-old body. During the first round of torture on August 28, 1596, Gaspar defended his innocence. The torturer was directed to apply more pressure. After a month to reflect on his offenses and to heal somewhat, Gaspar was once again subjected to this cruel examination, despite the fact that the first torture had not been properly carried out because of the mishap which Gaspar seemed to have suffered. Apparently he had fainted and his limbs swelled up, so the session ended prematurely. Still he confessed nothing. On the third occasion, the inquisitors decided that hanging him by his arms tied behind his back might be a bit more effective technique. This time, Gaspar did indeed confess. He said that while he had been baptized as a child and lived outwardly as a Catholic for decades, he was a Jew and had believed in the law of Moses for the last 16 or 17 years. The Lisbon authorities were not satisfied with Gaspar's confession. It seems he had not named enough names, and so yet another torture session was scheduled for early February 1597. It was now almost 4 years since Gaspar's arrest, and he was a broken man both mentally and physically. Gaspar told his examiners that his arms were in a bad way and that he would not be able to withstand further torture. In light of this, the members of the Holy Tribunal decided that this was enough. Gaspar Rodriguez Nunez, maimed in his right arm and hand, and his body covered with lesions, was released from prison on February 27th. He was ordered to appear at an auto de fe in Lisbon, where he would be reconciled with the church. He was forced to give up all his property except a form of house arrest, attend mass regularly, and wear the San Benito outside the home.
The San Benito was this yellow and red garment that publicly identified him with the crime of heresy at the time. Okay, but so his fate was maybe not as bad as others that they were sentenced. He was sentenced to house arrest, a financial penalty. He had to wear this San Benito, but Gaspar Rodriguez Nunez was a happier ending in 1604. But then 10 years later, he decided to flee Lisbon with his family and go to Amsterdam. What was in Amsterdam? It was a safe haven for Jewish people at the time. It was still within the, reverberating effects of the Spanish Inquisition. Many Jews ended up in Amsterdam. And finally, when he finally arrived in Amsterdam in 1614, he publicly changed his name from Gaspar to Joseph. He had a son, by the way, sorry, before he left, he had a son named Manuel Diaz Soiro, and he changed his son's name to Menashe. So this is this famous character we're about to discuss, Menashe ben Yisrael. The son of Gaspar was Menashe ben Yisrael. Okay, let's see. So what was his contribution? So his contributions, let's go through a quick summary here quickly on the slides. Hold on, slips away. Do this, we can have a better visual. Okay, so Menashe ben Yisrael, he was expelled in 1492, right? The Jewish people, many fled to Portugal. The Portuguese expelled the Jews in 1497. Gaspar Rodriguez Nunez was tortured and severely punished for his heresy. He fled to Amsterdam with his family. Menashe ben Yisrael is his son. Menashe ben Yisrael is the son of this Gaspar. So what did he contribute? He wrote many works. And when he wrote the works, as you guys were saying earlier, he wrote works not in Hebrew or Aramaic or in Jewish languages. He wrote his works in Spanish and in languages of the Jews at the time, for the Jews who were unlearned to read, and also the non-Jews. And what was his contribution? Number one, he opened printing presses, focusing on books for ex-converso Jews. Again, this is 100 plus years of zero study, of complete persecution. So people who even their grandfather knew something, at this point, 2, 3 generations, 4 generations later, they know nothing. So he wrote books specifically in languages that they understood. And he authored a number of books, including the Conciliator. The Conciliator, which basically we're going to read about here in text number 8. Let's see. Sorry, your name, please. Jack. Jack, please let's do text number 8.
Jewish prestige. I conceive that my work will be acceptable to the learned. For if duly examined, we shall find the study and lecture at Talmud were not considered unimportant. Some of the present questions were asked by the Alexandrians of R. Joshua ben Anina, an illustrious and learned sage, as stated in the Germana of Nina. We also learned from the Loch Olam and other parts that some heathen princes mooted similar doubts to the ancients, who, as disciples of the prophets, could alone interpret and solve many passages which, from their difficulty, would otherwise have been unintelligible. No little honor will accrue from it to the Hebrew nation and the sages of Israel, as the knowledge and intelligence they possess will be clearly seen in this work.
So he saw, this is an introduction to his book, okay? And what he saw was that the sages of the time, the Jewish sages, were not having any influence on society. And he wanted to raise the prestige of the sages, not because he wanted honor walking down the street, because he felt this idea, which is we need to show and share Jewish wisdom, Jewish morality with the rest of the world. And that's why he wrote it specifically in Latin. He did not write it in the original languages, in Hebrew. So let's see text number 9, which is again from Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael. Yes. Marla, thank you, Marla. Text 9.
Universal law. In the same way, great Lord, that in any well-governed republic, subjects are given laws under which they are to live. Being God, the architect and supreme creator of the universe, it must be believed infallibly that he has constituted, thank you, laws for his subjects and creatures. Because Azimah, how could the world be sustained? Or what way would there be to live among men if they were not governed by divine command? Thus we believe that he has given to all nations the 7 precepts, which are called the laws of the sons of Noah, who are all over the world. And these are not to idolize, not to kill, not to adulterate, steal, not to curse in the name of God, not to eat the meat of live animals, and to establish judges who enforce these laws. As to the children of Israel, whom he chose as his people, he further established the law of Moses, contained in 613 precepts.
So he felt, and by the way, the founding fathers of this country turned to the Bible for their natural law. Natural law in the in the United States Constitution also is based on these core ideas that come from a God-given morality. So let's go through them here, the 7 Noahide laws, and maybe extend. These are not just laws that only believe in God, but there's a reason for them, which we'll talk about right now. And there's also ramifications of it. What are the effects of it? So the first one obviously is no idolatry. You cannot serve an idol. Again, when the Torah came out with this idea, when Abraham came with this idea, what was the most common religion at the time was paganism, which meant what?
Polytheism.
Yes, well, exactly. Then what do you have? You have God for everything you need. What that does is that creates no cohesive authority, moral authority. You feel in one way one day, you go to this God. You feel another way another day, go to that God. There's no consistent morality. So we're not just a bunch of random acts of evolution that we ended up in this world where there's no one guiding us. No. This world was designed and created by God, and there's an authority and there's a morality we have to abide by. So the first thing is no idolatry. There's a God in the world. You have to know that there's a God in the world. The next thing is no blasphemy, right? You're not allowed to curse God. Why? It's not that God is thin skin. God has a fragile ego. You can't curse him out. That's not the point. The point is that for us to do that, it demonstrates a lack of accepting God's yoke, God's dominion over us. That's why it's not allowed for the same reason. We have the third is no illicit relationships. We know that sexuality is a powerful energy, and it has to be used in a certain way. You can't have relations with whoever you want. It's specific. So just like within a marriage, it has to be, there's a code for the way we conduct ourselves. So sexual energy has to be directed in a certain way. It cannot just be, you're married, you want to have this or that. No, it's a very, very powerful force in this world, and it has to be used properly. The next thing is obviously no murder. I think the next three maybe go together: no murder, no theft, and no cruelty to animals. This is like we need to live in a world where we're created in the divine image and we are living cohesively with one another. No cruelty to animals is actually interesting because it's not in the Ten Commandments. So far, all of these are in the Ten Commandments. No cruelty to animals is not in the Ten Commandments, right? But back in the day, they had no refrigeration. So one of the cruel things they would do is if they were hungry, they didn't want to, process a whole cow. How are you going to use the whole cow? It's going to go bad before you can use it. So one of the things they did was they would put some sort of tourniquet on a limb and they would take off the limb. Well, the animal's still alive. It was a horrible, horrible thing that obviously going back many, many years. So when this was in Noah's time. So God said, after the flood of Noah, these are the 7 laws by which society has to be sustainable. And one of them is you must respect an animal. You can't be cruel to an animal, right? Now, just because it's not in the Ten Commandments doesn't mean it's not a part of Jewish also, but okay. And the last one is to create a judiciary and law enforcement. You cannot have a society where there's no law and order and there's no people enforcing the law, because otherwise, it says in the Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of the Fathers, people will swallow each other alive. Basically, practically. So therefore, these are the 7 Noahide laws. So Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael, when he had the ability to flee and come to Amsterdam and finally do printing presses and write books, he didn't only focus on himself, his Jewish brothers and sisters. He said, how do we take Jewish knowledge and Jewish wisdom and Jewish morality based in the Bible, based in the Torah, and spread it out, not in Hebrew, in Latin, whatever language the Jews spoke at the time. And this was something that was a big focus for him. Okay? Let's look at text 10. Barry, sorry. Yes, text 10.
Promoting the High Code. Moses delivered to us the divine command to ensure that all inhabitants of the world accept the Noahide laws. Anyone who accepts these 7 laws and observes them is considered one of the righteous among the nations, earns themselves a place in the world to come. This is contingent on acceptance of the law, because they were commanded by God in the Torah. Moses informed us that Noah's descendants had previously been commanded to observe them.
So when the Jewish people were in the temple times in Israel, there weren't only Jewish people living in Israel. There were many other people living in Israel, which was fine. What was the requirement to live in Israel? Under Jewish rule, under King David, under King Solomon, whoever it was you have to abide by the 7 Noahide laws. That was the minimum. That's it. Abide by the 7 Noahide laws. You were considered in Hebrew a ger toshav, which means a legitimate settler and resident in Israel, and it was fine. But the moment the exile happened, the Jewish people were not able to fulfill the commandment to share the 7 Noahide laws with the world. Why? Trying to survive. What to share with the world? You're being persecuted right and left. You're running from town to town. Impossible. When Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael saw the opportunity that he can influence his brothers and sisters, he immediately seized the opportunity and took it up with the printing presses and with everything else he did. Let's look, text 11. Fine ladies. Remind me your name, I'm sorry. Reisa. Let's do text 11, please.
Several eminent Christian scholars, all of them Christian Hebraism, evinced an extraordinary interest in Noahide law. Menashe was in contact with 2 such scholars, Hugo Grotius and Peter Cornelius, and was undoubtedly familiar with the third, John Selber. These scholars had rediscovered, as it were, in Rabbinic and Old Testament sources, an ancient model for governance, one they believed to be something resembling, if not constituting, an ancient articulation of natural law. Associated Noahide law
with something like natural law in his book of 1617. The Republica, whatever.
Don't even try.
Yes. In 1640s, the Christian Hebraist John Selden published his The Jew Naturally, an entire work that takes as its premise that no hard law and the law of nature are one and the same. Selden cited the matter as an authority.
Right, beautiful. So the circle of political thinkers that Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael interacted with shaped the political philosophers such as John Locke, James Harrington. These were people that were influenced directly from the work of Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael, because he was able to put these books out there and interact with them and be able to show them the beautiful message of the Torah. We even have the painter here. The painting of Daniel's vision, right? You guys see page 74 in your books? Yes, from Rembrandt, exactly. These were paintings that were influenced by Rabbi Menashe as well. Many scholars concluded that Rembrandt consulted with Menashe in the producing of these paintings to make sure they were accurate. But again, his main thing was his contribution with the 7 Noahide laws as a light unto the nation. In 1655, there was a great effort to try to get England to reaccept their Jews. There's about 350 years that England has expelled their Jews from England, and Rabbi Menashe himself was in touch with, consistent with Oliver Cromwell at the time, and he actually writes in his writings, Rabbi Menashe writes in his writings, he did not come to see that day come true, but he writes his frustration, and eventually Oliver Cromwell was able to influence the English society there to reaccept their Jews, and we contribute that decision from the influence of Menashe ben Yisrael, You see here on page 75 from 1655, his interactions, a book. In this book, he argues for the readmission of the Jewish people into England. Okay, Rabbi Menashe died in 1657, so he never ended up seeing he passed away in the Netherlands. He never ended up seeing what his efforts to come true, but at least his effect had a reverberating effect. So we have, number one, what do we learn from Menashe ben Yisrael? Number one, he influenced political thinkers such as John Locke, James Harrington, and artists such as Rembrandt, and he lobbied for the readmission of the Jews to England. And this was a man, again, that saw this as his responsibility because he was in that era. Okay. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, Jews were readmitted to England thanks to his influence and promoted the message of Jewish ethics and morality to non-Jews. Anyone ever heard of Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael before today? Right, I heard his name here and there, but I did not know all these details about him. It's pretty remarkable. Okay, the next person we're going to discuss is Rabbi Avadia Sefarno. We actually have a video that I'd like to play that I'm going to go through some of these texts. Let me...
Rabbi Avadia, is this the same Rabbi Avadia like last we spoke about?
No.
This is another one.
Yeah. Different one completely. Yeah. Good question. Okay, let me get the thing. Here we go. You guys online, tell me if you hear it, yes?
Yes.
Hold on a second.
No. Johannes Rosen was a German diplomat and a great intellectual. He studied Hebrew when he was still in Germany. He learned with a rabbi called Yechiel Loans in Frederick II's court. He was a physician there. And later he was sent on a diplomatic mission in 1498 to Rome. And while he was there, he turned to Sforno to ask him to teach him. What he taught him was subject to much dispute and much discussion by academics. The truth about it is certainly what Saverio Campanini, who's a great professor in the field, who checked Reuchlin's books, and what he came up with was that Sforno probably taught Moreh Nevuchim, the Maimonides guide. Reuchlin was interested in Judaic studies, first of all, because the idea was at the time that truth lies in various places of ancient wisdom, and especially as Judaism is the source for all other monotheistic religions. So the war against the Jewish book goes back the early years of Christianity. Most famous was in the Middle Ages, the burning of the Talmud in Paris, which actually brought to the end the Jewish community in France, because once you have no books, once you have no Talmud, so you don't have any study, and you don't have any rabbis, and everyone who knew anything about the Jewish religion had to leave to other places to be able to study. The problem of Christians with the Talmud is because they understand that the Talmud is a source of strength to the Jewish nation, but they would also say that that's the reason that the Jews don't recognize the truth of Christianity. So they often tried to wage war against the Talmud, and in Germany, following the acclamations of a Jewish apostate who was actually a petty criminal, who to save his skin became Christian, and then decided that he was a big rabbi and he understands the Talmud, Johannes Pfefferkorn, so as two Johannes fighting one against each other. And that's where Johannes Reuchlin came out with all his might and all his knowledge to save the Talmud from being burning in Germany. Right at the beginning of the book affair, the books of the Jewish community in Frankfurt were taken in custody by the church, and there was a committee that was supposed to verify the claims that the Talmud contains something against Christianity. At this point, Pfefferkorn was the instigator, wrote a book proving as if the Talmud contains a lot of blasphemy against Christianity and against the founder of Christianity. And Johannes Reuchlin did something which at the time was very, very brazen act, and he actually printed a book against Pfefferkorn's book, which was countering the claims of Pfefferkorn and trying also to prove that Pfefferkorn was an absolute ignorant who didn't even know the Talmud. It actually carried on going back and forth for some years. The Pope at the beginning did not get involved, and then when he actually did get involved, and there was another committee, and eventually Reuchlin was part of the committee who was supposed to give the final verdict, and he was actually the only one who understood Hebrew in that committee, but he stood firm, stood his ground, though he was going through a lot of persecutions, which brought to his early death. But eventually the decree was rescinded, and the books in Germany were not burnt. Reuchlin cannot be called a Jew lover, though he respected Jews that had knowledge and could help him with their knowledge. And he wasn't a rabid anti-Semite, but he was still a man of his time, which usually European at the time would not be, cannot be accused of loving Jews. But he understood that the science of the Talmud and of general Jewish knowledge contains a lot of truths. A few times when they were speaking about expulsions of Jews from Germany or from Italy, Reuchlin spoke out very strong against it, stating that if no one here will know Hebrew, all those truths will be lost. So it wasn't really the Jews that he was trying to save, but their books. But he viewed the Jews as the keepers of those books and that knowledge. And he understood also that lots of that knowledge was oral knowledge, which could not be, it was not committed to writing. So that's the reason that he saw it as so important to save the Talmud and to save actually the Jews also from being expelled from Europe.
Pretty fascinating stuff. So we have here a story of a non-Jew in probably the most hostile environment for Jews, taken up and defending the Jewish people, defending their books, right after the burning of the Talmud in France. I think it was 700 wagon loads of books that they went from synagogue to synagogue, from study hall to study hall, loaded up all the Talmud, everything onto the books in front of in Paris, and made a massive burning and burnt all the books and expelled all the Jews. In literally a few months, the Jewish community of Paris, which was the epicenter of Jewish law and Jewish study at that time, was gone. Germany wanted to follow right after, and this Johannes Reuchlin was actually the one that saved it. We're going to learn about him now. I'm just realizing that the people online probably didn't see the video, right, guys? You only heard it?
Yes, that's correct.
Sorry, I apologize for that. My bad. I should have noticed that. But okay, let's learn about Rabbi Ovadia Sforno, which basically was the first one to study with Johannes Reuchlin. Let's see page 76. Name. Marcia. Thank you.
The next step of our lesson moves from Jewish Spanish diaspora of Amsterdam to explore 16th century Italy, home to a remarkable Bible commentator, Rabbi Ovadia
Sforno. Okay, yes. Let's look at text number 12, please. Yes, please. Yeah.
In 1498-99, an ambassador of the Palatinate, Brooklyn, also studied Hebrew under the renowned Jewish scholar Ovadia Sforno in Rome. With the intensive instruction from Sforno, as well as his own efforts, Reuchlin was able to publish the first Hebrew grammar and lexicon for Christians. The book, written in Latin, is based heavily on the medieval Jewish grammar of Moses Kimmel and the famous Hebrew dictionary, the Book of Roots by David Kimmel.
Right. So Reuchlin wrote a book on Kabbalah, and he met with Ovadia Sforno. So let's look at Ovadia Sforno's life a little. His ancestors fled to Italy after the 1391 pogroms. He received the doctrine in Ferrara, Italy in 1501. Rabbi Ovadia was a prominent Jewish figure in Rome. After war in Rome, he moved to Bologna, Italy. So let's see text 13. So before we do text 13, you have to understand there was a big effort in Europe at the time to end Judaism. In 1492 was the Spanish expulsion. Portuguese forced conversion was in 1497. England expelled the Jews in 1290. France in 1394. There was a consistent momentum to ending Judaism. And Rabbi Ovadia Sforno, through his influence on Johannes Reuchlin, was able to at least save the German Jewish community at the time. Let's get text 13. Does anyone online want to read? I think we can all hear you. Text 13?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Please go ahead.
An unprecedented attack on Judaism began in earnest in 1509. The goal of the 1509 persecution was to weaken and break the surviving Jewish communities in one comprehensive effort by confiscating and destroying every Jewish book except the Hebrew Bible, thereby making it impossible to practice the religion properly. This aggressive strategy, carefully formulated to be compatible with imperial law, was initially spearheaded by Johannes Pfefferkorn, a recent convert to Christianity. Implementation of the new policy began in September 1509 in Frankfurt am Main, home to one of the three most prominent Jewish communities in Germany, the other two being Worms and Regensburg. Despite strong resistance from Jewish leaders, a complete confiscation in Frankfurt was carried out by April of 1510, and other Rhineland communities, including Worms, who also suffered communities confiscations in 1509 and 1510.
Okay, let's keep on going with text 14. Anyone else online? Maybe Dan or Millie?
I can.
14?
14, please. Yes.
Okay. The emperor issued a new mandate on 6 July 1510 that required legal and theological evaluations of the confiscated policy from 4 universities and 3 individual scholars including Rochlin. While all the other experts submitted enthusiastic endorsements for implementing the new policy, to everyone's astonishment, Rochlin argued against Maximilian's tactics, was forcefully contending that the book confiscated did not accord with imperial law and was not justified on religion or theological grounds. He carefully elaborated this defense and in an extensive legal analysis. He sent the emperor in October 1510, and then published in 1511. Although his conclusions stood alone among the 7 evaluations, Rochlin's defense was so powerful, argued that it effectively stymied the new, dangerously potent method of persecution. As far as we know, all the books were returned to the Jewish owners, and despite determined effort, the strategy was never again attempted in early modern Germany.
So all the experts of the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian's commission, they all suggested this idea. Let's ban the books. Let's get rid of the Jews. These are problems. Obviously, these were, in the beginning, this was a problem throughout the whole Europe, and there was only one voice that countered it, and this was the voice of Rochlin. He single-handedly prevented the Talmud from being burnt and continued the study. Let's look at text 15. Millie, would you do text 15, please?
In the year 1510, enemies and renegades rose up against our people, seeking to destroy our Torah books. God showed us a miracle within a miracle, as non-Jewish scholars countered our oppressors and returned the Torah books to their former glory.
Beautiful. There was a decree against the Jews that they saw it as a double miracle. Number one, the decree was being averted. And by who was the decree averted? Not by the typical story of Hanukkah and Purim and Jews intervening. This was seemingly a non-Jew, which saw not the value per se. He wasn't a Jewish lover per se. He just saw the value of these books being preserved and the keepers of the book being preserved. He maybe had his own intention, which is fine. He was a good guy, probably, fine. But he wasn't doing it for the most amazing, noble reasons, perhaps. But the Jewish people at the time saw this as a double whammy miracle. That it was, and that it was by who. So Sephorno wrote a book on philosophy called Or Amim, which literally means light of the nations, and where he goes through and he writes about the 7 Noahide laws. Let's look at the screen for a second. Rabbi Avadia's commentary explains the simple meaning of the Torah and logical reasons for its mitzvahs, and highlights the text's moral lessons, written in a style understandable to the layperson. This was his contribution. So he taught Rochlin, who developed a fascination with Jewish ownership, with Jewish scholarship. Rochlin wrote the Arte Kabbalistica, an art of Kabbalah, and then Rochlin fought against the banning of all Jewish books in the Holy Roman Empire. Rabbi Avadia wrote Or Amim, which argues against Aristotelian beliefs. The video we just played, fine. So we are, we're going to sum up his life. He influenced Johannes Rochlin, the prominent supporter of Judaism in Germany, and he wrote an authoritative commentary on the Torah. Let's see, in conclusion, let's look at the next section. Well, before we go to the next section, any questions or comments, guys? Nisht? Okay, good. Let's look at page 82. Who else is online? Maybe Noel. Maybe you want to read the conclusion, text 82?
Sure. Historically, due to their position as persecuted minority, the Jews were exceedingly limited in their ability to fulfill their destiny to serve as a light unto the nations. Although the state of affairs persisted for many centuries, it has suddenly shifted dramatically. Our modern era of religious freedom accords us far greater opportunities than ever existed previously to live upon our divine calling.
Nice. So we should recognizing that, yes, we have this responsibility, but perhaps more than any other time in our history, do we have that responsibility to be a light unto the nations? To do what? To teach the moralities of Torah, the moralities of the Jewish teachings to the world. Let's see text 16. Elizabeth, please. Text 16.
You shall be to me a kingdom of priests, Exodus 19:6. You will be a unique treasure to me in the sense that you will be a kingdom of priests whose mission is to guide and teach the entire human race to call upon the name of God and to serve him with one purpose. Zephaniah 3:9.
So for most of Jewish history, unfortunately, where we didn't have the ability to do this, today we do. We should take on this responsibility. I think what the Rebbe led the charge that we should do this, that we should encourage it. Why? Because we need to live in a society that's guided by a moral North Star. Morality cannot be subjective. Because the moment morality is subjective, what happens? For me, one thing is moral. For you, it's not moral. Fine, but there's no society where we're safe to live unless we all agree to one code of morality. This nation was established on that code, and it's our responsibility to spread that. I want to share another video. This time I'll share the actual video of the Rebbe talking and encouraging us to do just that. Let's see. Ten seconds, guys. Second. You guys see the screen? Guys online, you see the screen?
Yes. Yes.
Good. Let's see if this works. Second, slow it down, slow it down, slow it down. 2x. Does anyone else here do 2x all the time? All right, here we go. I'm just going to pause a second and what you're looking at. This is called a farbrengen. A farbrengen is a gathering where we have them every Shabbos, every Shabbat services after we pray. We have a discussion, we sit around, we talk about different areas in life. So the Rebbe would farbring this type of occasion many times throughout the year, and people would fly in from all over the world to be present, but it was broadcasted around the world, in Paris, Moscow, Melbourne, Sydney, Buenos Aires, Canada, all over the world. This was the original. If you go today to 770, Chabad World Headquarters, there's a room called the hookup room. I know it sounds weird in today's society, but the hookup room is literally, you'll see a room with phones, actual phones that would do a hookup. They would do like the hookup around the world. And it's still there today. The original technology from 40, 50 years ago, which was one of the original technologies in the world to broadcast internationally like that out of some private synagogue. But when the Rebbe would talk about, let's say it was a Passover, it was a holiday, this, that. The Rebbe would talk about world events. The Rebbe spoke about the wars in the world. The Rebbe spoke about political stuff. The Rebbe spoke about the moon landing. The Rebbe spoke about everything in the world that was going on to make it relevant. So here we have an extra about 4 minutes about the Rebbe talking about the importance for all of us to be a light to our brothers and sisters around us, to be a light unto the nations. And it's not just limited to Jews. Anyone who wants to follow God's wisdom, we can't just keep the wisdom to ourselves. We have an opportunity and another opportunity, a responsibility to share it. So that's what you're looking at, is a video of these talks known as a Farbrengen. Yes, Mike?
Just a quick clarification
Yeah.
that within the various Hasidic movements, especially the Chabad movement, which
Yeah.
is the one you're a part of, for the, since the middle of the 1800s, each movement has been led by a particular rabbi who is called the Rebbe. And it's the leader in that generation. And the Rebbe we're going to hear from right now is been the leader of the post-World War II generation in the Chabad movement. And he passed away in what, 1994?
Today, 1994, 31 years ago. Yeah.
31 years ago. And as the leader of the movement, he is considered to be a particularly holy man, particularly close to God in embodying those virtues. So when a Rebbe, as opposed to a rabbi, when a Rebbe is speaking to the followers in that movement, that's a very, very important thing for the followers. It is more than just listening to your local holy man,
yeah,
of whatever denomination you're a part of. I just wanted to be real clear about this because not everybody knows this background.
Yes, thank you, Mike. I want to say that the Rebbe's, part of the Rebbe's function was, the Rebbe was he set the mission and the focus of the generation, which means that, what is our responsibility to focus on? The Rebbe would sit and talk and say, guys, we need to focus on this, that, the other. And the Rebbe would start campaigns, and the Rebbe would start, have any of you guys been in Manhattan where you see those big mitzvah mobiles? It's called mitzvah tanks. They drive with like blasting music, and you jump. It's an RV. It's an RV. You come in and you do mitzvahs, and you go back to your office. So Rebbe started this campaign, mitzvah mobiles. There'd go 100 of these mitzvah mobiles throughout New York City. And why? Rebbe started campaigns. These campaigns, from here, from this room that you're looking at, Judaism around the world was revived, literally from these talks. Rebbe had an army of followers that were on board with Rebbe's mission to make this world a better place. Thank you, Mike.
Nice.
Verstandig. An dose David Kegel de Mitzvah von Dini, am Spiel gewesen, auf andere Bnei Neach. Als soll nechet Nekaim sein, die Sheva Mitzvah Bnei Neach, mit alle Seele Sifim und Snifim, bekommen, wo dose de Chechet nicht stabil. Ich habe smarten Teile, wo blemmt die Bottel geworden, die Gseele, war nie am Maschil. Und damit hat der Rebischte, was gewähnt der Maschil, hat angesagt hin und gegeben sie Keach, als sie sollen auftun, bechol boye Ebel, hat mir kein sein, die Mitzvah die Lehu, und das nicht stam Mitzvah die Duhun, und das der Linien, und Jesheves die Zolle, ist der Verstandig der Gebel Hoinien, das Schar, was mit der Kunde fahrt, was in Drufe der Klau, an Zena Kodesh Baruch und der Kapeich Schar Kol Beri, Allahs kamen der Kamen von Anodem, Shenivra Bezellen, der von Nechet verstandig, wenn der Geist zu Stadlust von Iden in See geben zu wissen, wenn unter die alle Unionen, dies wissen sie, was bis ist, wissen sie noch nicht, wie Schleimus sollte sie wissen noch nicht, gar nicht Bose, und die, was haben, Hakeres an der Koncha, mit der Hechelinkreis, können nicht Rätsel sein, der Miet, was sagt, mit Stadl Bose, mit Ibne Neich, was werden Bishchonosse, wie Kajetze Bose, nur darf es nutzen seine Verbindungen, wie Schleimusso, und ich frage noch, ob das Gepinzach und die Verbindung ist, mit der Sehne, was sie haben, als Sport, al-Kama Bnei Neach, und wie bald der Sehne mit Wacke, Schäbel, wie Kechom, ist doch eine sichere Sache, aber gibt es Mechit Keach, soll Teil sein, wie die, was gefunden sich, bei ihnen hat Bibel, oder in Amekem und am Matze von Bira, וכו'. Because Iden mal drauf nicht gehabt, in Keja, haben sie echt nicht gehabt, die Möglichkeit mit der Meile, die der Chateva. Was sie auch geschlossen in Magetta, wie Kajese Base, wo sie haben nicht gehabt, ki Mago Massa, Allahas Kama, wie Kama, Hashpo, Afame Ore, Chemisvir. Und mir gesehen, bei Pashtus, als bei der letzte, die Jorn, bei der letzte Pordeles, ich geworden als Ami meine du Masse, als ich geworden am Mago Masse, zwischen Iden und nicht Iden, nicht wie sie geworden liefen, ist Mama Golos, je mehr Binai wie Kajese Base, Schulei Beerech an Engere und am mehr Verbundene. Und die Koomur, wie bald als sie gegeben geworden, die Möglichkeit, fällt mehr nie, du musst mir wandern oder Schuss, weil ich Cheles, in die Sunna, lechol Echot ve Echot, wir darf nur werden, mit Wellen und ohne in Tonnen den bis der meiste Bepay. Und Schleimus Kolo Eilam Kuli, der Verbunden, der Niet, was Ekrel, Kol Hamim, Kulum Sofa Bluro, Jodi Kulum Schem Echot, und demol darf ke beäußern, Hawaii am Lucha, wie der Rambam bringt es Halloch, in Sipri Hallochis Hallochis, und in Hilchis in Nesa Moschiach, ki metuber kama pomim, in das Negea, der Achonelose, wo der Achonelose, der Eklal Kol Hamim, so Lufton Pulosi, wo bis Riesens, Beteche von Miyad, darf man doch Achone Massimo, und das ist Bepashtus, Seichit im Chayim, mit Kiyum, mit Schäfer, Mitzes, Bnei Neir, Dilhu, macht sie Muchschu, auf Mekabel sein und Kehli sein und der Richer Mekayim sein, die Kriya, wie schau sie kommt, Teke von Miyad Mamosh, wo demut ist Teke von Miyad Mamosh, wo Oisel Havai am Luch.
There you go. You got three different talks of the Rebbe. The Rebbe is pushing us and encouraging us to go and do just that, which is to make this world a better place. So beautiful inspiration.
Yiddish or German?
Yiddish, 100% Yiddish. Yeah.
Not one woman.
Well, there's a women's section on top.
Oh.
There's a whole women's section, yeah. It's really not in the video, yes. But there, yes, good point. Yeah. It is separate seating, but there's many women present. Thousands. Thousands on the bottom.
This was, when was this?
It's from the 1980s, I think. Yeah.
That recently.
What'd you say, Andy?
That recently.
Say again.
That recently.
Yeah. This was the Rebbe passed away in 1994. Yeah. So next week we're going to talk about two incredible Jewish women and their contributions. Robbie, perfect timing. And we're going to discuss how a Jewish woman was able to save many Jewish people from the Spanish Inquisition and bring them over to Israel. We'll learn about that next week. We're also going to learn about a Rebbitzin. Her name was Bela Katz, and how she was able to influence Jewish ritual and practice in her era as well. So thank you all for coming. We're going to be next week, 11 a.m. here, despite what an email will tell you. We'll be here at 11 a.m. So thank you very much for joining us.
And then we don't have.
I was the one who called it.
We don't have it on the next.